If you're like me, and after the Super Bowl ends in the first week of February and you enter into a post-NFL second half of winter depression, and you're looking for something to fill that football-sized void in your heart, as I said in my lead-in here, Mr. Vince McMahon actually came up with a solution for us. This is the second iteration of the XFL and is one of many attempts at spring football, all of which have so far failed. So those of you that are just counting down the weeks until this has failed, I'm here to tell you today that there is an opportunity for success. So the first thing I want to go through in terms of talking about the XFL is kind of the first attempt back in 2001, so we can learn from what they did wrong in that attempt, and then go on to why I think that they have a better opportunity this time, 19 years later, at success. So for those of you that don't know, the XFL is created by WWE and WWF chairman Vince McMahon. So obviously coming from the entertainment side of things, in 2001, if any of you are familiar with the WWE or WWF, at the time that was what was considered the Attitude Era. So everybody, the main draw for the WWF during the Attitude Era was violence and sex. So having a similar crossover violence-wise with football and WWE, Vince McMahon wanted to bring a new brand of football to the American public. So the first mistake was the way that he did try to brand this football league using the violence and sex kind of rhetoric. In terms of the violence, the first thing he did was go after the NFL, saying that it was a kind of wussy league, which was a horrible way to go. Obviously, that would not fly now with all the medical stuff that comes up with head injuries and what have you in the NFL and just football in general. So the way that they would market it was having less personal foul penalties, less unnecessary roughness penalties, and just a lot more violence. There was no fair catch rule, for instance, and one of their early commercials was a player catching a punt and then getting demolished by a wrecking ball to kind of indicate how the league was supposed to go. And then the sex piece, they actually, before having teams, team names, stadiums, anything, they went completely after their cheerleaders as a way to sell the product. Obviously going after the men's demographic from like 24 to 39. What this brought was a fanhood from football fans and wrestling fans trying to combine it, but really the product on the field for football was so bad that the football fans didn't latch on, and those coming from wrestling were expecting a lot more violence, and that never really resonated either. So they didn't really succeed at all. They also had some publicity backfires. One of their biggest things that they were trying to do was build awareness for the league, and what they tried was having a blimp in the shape of an XFL football. Well, that's like how all blimps are shaped, but it has the XFL logo on it, and they were going to fly it over one of the NFL games going on. They did this in Miami. The blimp actually ended up crashing into a seafood restaurant, which ended up being very indicative of how the league went. But after those mistakes, it seems like this was a complete failure. However, they did have a couple of good ideas that the NFL and a lot of TV networks use today. For instance, the Skycam, which is the camera that comes across the field on a cable, kind of gives you like a video game-like view, was the goal of this camera angle, is used by all the popular networks, and you'll see that on any NFL game or college game that you watch today. And miking up players was also an idea by the XFL, just to give more access to a group of athletes that when playing with a helmet on, they're a lot less accessible and relatable. So using this mic'd up idea in the XFL, that really helped to broaden their athletes in terms of marketability, and the NFL uses that today. So some of the changes that I see them making in 2020, they just came off a very successful week 1, and I'll give you some reasons why I think that there will be some opportunity for success. So some of the indicators that I have for success is, once again, they're giving more access to the players, coaches, and refs. During the broadcast, you hear the coaches when they relay plays to the players. So you get an idea of the complexity of all the plays, but then the play-by-play announcer has an opportunity to explain to the general public kind of what each term means and gives them an idea of what's going to happen on the upcoming play. You've got more interviews with the players. They actually have on-field reporters that walk up right to the players as they're running off the field. And, this happens on good and bad plays, so I could see this ending disastrously at some point when you're asking the guy why he threw that third pick and what he was looking at on that outlet. But, as right now, it's kind of cool. And then also with the refs, there's a lot more transparency. You can hear their conversations when they're making penalty calls. They've also got a video or a camera and mic in the replay booth as well, so you can get an idea. You can watch actually the replay official go through the replays and then watch him chat with his assistant replay official as well as they're deciding how to make a particular call. The second bullet point I have here is they're embracing sports gambling. That's a huge market and a huge opportunity for a lot of sports leagues to grow. As more states legalize gambling, they even have the spread and totals on the ticker for ESPN and ABC broadcasts. So they talk about it all the time. The biggest thing I think is the TV deal. Last year there was the AAF that was done after 8 weeks of what was supposed to be a 10-week season, and I think their biggest letdown was that people couldn't find where the games were. They were on CBS Network, Sports Network, which is one of the least watched sports network and least owned sports network by the general public. All of these games will be on ABC, Fox, ESPN, Fox Sports 1. So they're going to be easily accessible for the entire season, and I think that'll make a huge difference. And then lastly, they actually took a complete turn in terms of the way that the football is played on the field. They weren't looking for more violence. They were looking for more longevity of football as a whole, and they implemented rules to make sure that that happens. Starting with the kickoff rule. So this is where a lot of concussions occur and most of the injuries come into play in the NFL and other football leagues, just because of the sprinting and how much speed you gain when the collisions happen. So at this, you're still kicking the ball off at the 30 like you would in the NFL. However, everybody on the kickoff team is lined up on the receiving team's 35, while all of the kick return team is lined up on their own 30. Therefore, there's only a 5-yard gap, not much room for speed to accumulate, and then none of these players can move until the ball is caught. So I think this will lead to longer kickoffs, or longer kickoff returns, which will in turn lead to more scoring and less injuries, and it also keeps a play that's can be exciting in the game. Secondly, the extra point rules. So there's no more kicking. Extra point's the time to go to the bathroom, typically in the NFL. Just a free point. However, in the XFL, you have an opportunity or a chance to go for a 1-point extra point from the 2 points from the 5, or 3 points from the 10. This makes the end of games much more exciting. For one, a 9-point game is no longer a 2-possession game, and it just brings more excitement to every single extra point that there is, and a lot more strategy towards the end of game situations. And then lastly, they have the comeback period. One of the big gripes about the NFL is how long the games are. Who's got time for 4 hours 8 hours if you're watching 2 games. Well, and then the Sunday night game, 12 hours. I mean, I do it, but not everybody wants to do it. So anyways, for the XFL, they have running clock for the first 28 minutes of each half, and then in the last 2 minutes, they have what's called the comeback period. This is where plays will end, or plays that end in the field of play that in the NFL the clock would continue running. They actually stop the clock for the first 5 seconds of the play clock to create more plays in the last 2 minutes and create more opportunities for comebacks and what have you, hence the name, the comeback period. So I hope that gives you kind of an idea of where football is going, and I hope that the NFL uses some of these rules, and I hope that the XFL has an opportunity to kind of stay alive, and I hope you guys give it a shot. My Battlehawks, who I've clung on to from St. Louis, they won as 8-point underdogs this weekend, so I'm looking forward to a good season. Adam Toastmaster.